I'm John Little, and this is the SHOCKCAST for January 17, 2014. Currency explosion this year, Jim Willie. When I sat down yesterday to write my article, Time Running Out to Buy Gold, I was originally going to write something else. I was going to talk about the interview with Jim Willie that I heard Wednesday night. However, I always pray about what I'm going to write before I write, and I was led to make a quick check of the registered gold inventory at the New York Commodity Exchange, COMEX. What I saw shocked me and redirected the course of my writing yesterday. Today, we get to the article that I wanted to write. Jim Willie is one of the most brilliant financial forecasters on the planet, and like many brilliant men, he can be a bit less decorous in his way of speaking than most people. Of course, if I wanted decorum, I'd be watching the BBC and learn nothing useful. And it was something that he said that urged me to check out the registered gold inventory in the COMEX warehouses. What Jim said was this: the Chinese will drain this nation and all Western nations of all their gold. With registered gold inventories in COMEX warehouses at less than 480,000 troy ounces, it looks like the Chinese have been successful in their efforts. And there's worse. The Chinese have started buying up physical assets within the United States. Russia is pushing Saudi Arabia into a corner. The U.S. is already at war with China in Africa. And gold mines in Central America are getting hammered by organized crime. Greg Hunter has a summary of his interview on usawatchdog.com, and I want to read it to you. U.S. bled to death by China and harvested for its organs, Dr. Jim Willie. Financial newsletter writer Dr. Jim Willie has a bleak warning for America. Dr. Willie says, I don't think the United States is going to be killed as the host. I think it's going to be bled to death and harvested for its organs, and done so by China. Dr. Willie explains the Chinese will drain this nation and all the Western nations of all their gold. Dr. Willie predicts I have been saying steadily, not until the dollar has problems and the globe starts saying we're not going to use the U.S. dollar anymore and we're going to force a devaluation on you, that is when the dollar will hit Main Street and the U.S. economy with price inflation. It's coming this year. This is the late stage, the very late stage. Dr. Willie goes on to predict that Deutsche Bank will fail, causing a string of bank failures, a domino effect of failed banks. Dr. Willie goes on to say, when the big impact comes from the dollar global rejection and when devaluation does take place, there will be three effects: a jump in prices, food shortages and supply disruptions. The third is violence. This is the year we have the currency explosion. Don't think Obamacare is going to make things easier. Dr. Willie thinks Obamacare will be 100 times the nightmare than you think it might be. Obamacare is a big plan to track people, both their money and their bodies, like a bunch of herded animals. This is going to manage death of the individual and manage death of the economy. Join Greg Hunter as he goes one-on-one with Dr. Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter, which can be found on goldenjackass.com. A note about Greg Hunter's usawatchdog.com. I strongly recommend that you watch or listen to Greg Hunter's interviews as often as you can. He brings on intelligent and clear-minded experts on finance, economy, and current events and teases out the information you need right now. Greg's slogan for his website is, analyzing the news to give you a clear picture of what's really going on. And I believe that Mr. Hunter has done exactly that. But back to the Jim Willie interview. What Jim is talking about in the interview is the complete destruction of the dollar by China. China is using its dollar reserves to buy up every ounce of gold that it can get its hands on. At the same time, the problems with the dollar will mount until the world decides that it can't use the dollar anymore. Once this begins, the world will dump most, if not all, of the dollars in their currency reserves. When this happens, the cost of everything will shoot through the roof. And Jim believes that this process will begin in 2014. Somewhere in the midst of this 2014 crisis, Deutsche Bank will fall, starting a domino effect with a string of major bank failures across the globe. And when they fall, they will take whatever money you have in these banks. As I have said before, you must get your money out of the banks and every other financial institution. Having any money in any financial company of any kind is a recipe for disaster. Only keep in the bank what you need to pay your bills. Jim goes on to describe the three events that will follow the beginning of the crash of the dollar: a massive jump in prices, food shortages and supply disruptions, and violence. And then Jim Willie makes this ominous prediction about Obamacare. It will be 100 times more of a nightmare than you think it might be. 100 times? That's quite a nightmare. And unfortunately, I believe it. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the interview here. You can find it on GregHuntersUSAWatchdog.com. What's worse, Jim Willie is really only talking about the beginning of this disaster. This may take months or years to play out, but when it's over, we'll have utter destruction and a stage that will have been set for the coming of the Antichrist. What's worse, Jim Willie is really only talking about the beginning of this disaster. This may take months or years to play out, but when it's over, we'll have utter destruction and a stage that will have been set for the coming of the Antichrist. Let me emphasize again that the catastrophe that is coming right now, this is not the coming of the Antichrist or the tribulation, but it will prepare the world for the coming of Satan's diabolical masterpiece, the very same Antichrist and tribulation. Are you ready for this? Please note I am not offering financial or disaster preparation advice in a professional capacity. These are merely my own thoughts on what I would do in these situations.